The old freighter, the Roost Runner, rattled with every uneven thrust from those ancient engines. I hated these supply runs. Nothing like weeks confined with the same sweat-stained faces, the air filled with the stench of stale food and unwashed bodies. "Think this is it, Captain?" O'Hara rumbled. His voice was less a collection of words and more a gravelly landslide. I hated O'Hara more than the runs themselves. Man thought his bulk meant he was in charge. I forced a smile. "We'll see. Better keep your eyes on the scanners. Wouldn't want to miss it again." O'Hara's snarl was my best reward. The asteroid belt surrounding Proxima was a damned graveyard. Hulks of ships older than the colony itself littered the region. Some mined out, some derelict victims of accidents 100 years past. We weren't here for their scrap. Our target was older still, mythic. The Sentinel vanished nearly 3 centuries ago. Supposedly crammed with tech the colony could sell for a king's ransom. Or it was a ghost story and we were chasing shadows for a drunk's promise. Another jolt rattled my teeth, throwing Sparks out of his nav seat. "Captain," he whined, the youngest among us. "You sure these readings are right?" "They're right," I grunted, peering at the screen. The blip was undeniable and far deeper in the belt than anyone usually dared to go. "Prepare for deceleration. And let's hope the old girl holds together out here." Hours later, it loomed before us. No graceful curves, no gleaming metal like modern ships. It was a massive metal cylinder, pitted and scarred, drifting lazily as if the universe itself had forgotten it existed. "Well, damn me," O'Hara said, a rare moment where he wasn't trying to undermine me. "It's real." I didn't answer. For all the legends, I hadn't truly believed it existed either. And now the sight of it set off a disquiet I couldn't name. There was no logic to the size, the age, nothing about it that made sense. "Boarding party prep." My words held none of my own unease. O'Hara, Sparks, and me. We suited up, the rough clanking of aged armor a poor substitute for the suits back on the colony. Tools were checked, ancient airlock protocols followed. Breaching the Sentinel wasn't flashy. A hiss, a groan of stressed metal, and then the stink of truly old air came over us. "Smells like death," Sparks whispered, voice tight. "Smells like money," O'Hara retorted. And he was right, in a way. A single tremor coursed through the ship, then silence again. If there were systems still running, we couldn't hear them over the pounding of our own blood. I led them deeper, bulkheads bearing archaic markings we couldn't decipher, corridors lit by the pitiful glow of our suit lamps, the vastness a crushing weight upon us. "Think there'll be bodies?" Sparks's voice was barely audible over the comms. Another thing I hated about these rust buckets. The fear they stirred up in otherwise hardened men. "Shut it, boy!" O'Hara snapped. He took point, his massive form dwarfing the hallway. It was as good a statement as any. O'Hara wasn't afraid. Or, I realized with a jolt, he was fueled by that fear, his bullishness a mask for the same unease we all felt. And that unease, it was getting to me now too. We were tomb raiders, not archaeologists. We had no business here. Then O'Hara stopped short. "Something up there," he grunted. My own lamp followed his. At first I saw nothing but dust and dim metal. Then a subtle ripple just beyond our light. The emptiness wasn't empty anymore. Something was watching us. "Weapons on!" I barked, voice sharp enough to cut through the mounting terror. Sparks yelped, his light beam wobbling. Fear did that to you, made even veterans sloppy. "Easy, Captain." O'Hara's voice was surprisingly level, bulky mag rifle humming into readiness. "Don't want to be spooking shadows." "This ain't a shadow," I snapped, my own fear fueling irritation. I shifted my weight, combat reflexes kicking in despite the decades of rust. My eyes strained against the gloom, seeking the source of that ripple. Nothing. Just the same damn dust-choked corridor. "Maybe it was a rat?" Sparks' voice was a pitiful squeak. He needed toughening up, that one. Out here, weakness got you killed. O'Hara snorted. Rats don't send shivers down a man's spine. You feel it too, then? I challenged. O'Hara's silence was admission enough. We were experienced spacers, not the type to jump at every creak of an old ship. This was different. We move on, I decided, tone brooking no argument. Stay sharp, stay together. Whatever this is, it won't catch us off guard. The words felt hollow, even as I said them. Confidence was a good weapon in our line of work, but right now it felt about as solid as stardust. The Sentinel's interior was a maze, twisting and turning with no logic we could discern. Each corridor seemed longer than the last, the silence stretching nerves taut. I fought the urge to glance back every few paces. The primal part of my brain convinced that the moment we looked away, something horrible would manifest from the darkness. Twice more, that ripple disturbed the air. No shape, no sound, just the sensation of a malign presence brushing against the very edge of our perception. Sparks was trembling, mumbling under his breath. Prayers, I suspect, maybe curses. Hard to tell when a man's teetering on the edge of hysteria. And then, at last, something tangible. Life signs! Sparks's shout was shrill with relief, quickly turning to a strangled gasp. Captain, up there, on the bulkhead! A cluster of marks appeared and vanished against the dusty metal wall, their rhythm disturbing and irregular. Organic. Alien. And utterly at odds with everything we thought we knew about this ship. Record it, boy, I ordered, forcing calm into my voice. Analysis team back on the colony might make sense of this. O'Hara shifted closer, massive rifle trained on the anomaly. You ever seen anything like this, Captain? Hell no. The admission weighed upon me. Fear ripped through my guts, but a veteran spacer also understood something was seriously wrong out here. We pushed on, tension coiling tighter with every step. The glowing marks became more frequent, branching like diseased veins across walls and ceilings. My headache, a dull throb since we boarded the Sentinel, was now a white-hot spike behind my eyes. Suddenly, O'Hara froze, swinging his rifle wildly. There! I saw it. A hulking shadow, misshapen, flitting across an intersection. Too fast. And then it was gone, swallowed by the endless corridors. O'Hara, what the hell did you see? My voice rose, the strain on my control finally showing. His face was pale, bravado deserting him. I don't know, Captain. Big, too damn fast. We were losing it. Fear was turning us into the scared animals we'd mocked Sparks for being. I took a deep, steadying breath. This wasn't us. Time to regroup, get our heads straight. Fall back, we'll establish a perimeter, I started, but the words died as the first scream tore out of Sparks's comms. The scream didn't stop. It rose in a crescendo of pure terror, filling our archaic headsets, rattling our teeth. Sparks's frantic shouts cut through the agony, a disjointed torrent of panic. Grabbed me! Something... got in the dark! We reacted instinctively. O'Hara dropped into a firing stance, sweeping the corridor with his rifle, while I charged forward, my own weapon raised. The fear that had been coiled tight inside me now snapped, replaced by a rush of adrenaline and the urge to do something. Sparks! I roared into the comms, fear lacing my voice. Where are you? Answer me, damn it! Only static answered. Static and the remnants of that horrible scream, fading like an obscene whisper. I rounded a bend and skidded to a halt. There, on the ground, lay Sparks's helmet, the lamp shattered. No other sign of him. He's gone. O'Hara's voice was rough, the bluster finally knocked out of him. Then we go after him, I growled. My own words felt hollow, reckless. Going on was a special kind of madness, but leaving a man behind, alive or not, that was worse. The corridors seemed to stretch into infinity, making us feel trapped and overwhelmed. O'Hara moved with determination, but his usual bullish stride was subdued, his bulk seeming smaller in the face of the Sentinel's emptiness. Find him, I muttered under my breath. It was a plea, maybe to whatever spirits lingered on this damned ship, maybe an order to myself, because even as I pressed onward, I knew our chances were slim. Something was hunting us, and I was starting to suspect we were hopelessly outmatched. Every twist of the labyrinth brought new horrors. Sparks' shattered helmet was the first. Then we found his mag rifle, abandoned mid-corridor, a trail of glowing footprints leading away from it. Footprints that weren't human. O'Hara swore, his massive hand shaking. "What the hell is happening, Captain?" I didn't have an answer. Didn't even have a comforting lie. And for the first time, I considered the possibility that we had found something far worse than old tech out here. We sprinted down corridors we could have sworn we'd passed before, the interior of the Sentinel twisting into an insane maze. And then a new sound, a hiss, like breath forced through some inhuman orifice, and a stench, acrid and chemical. I skidded to a halt, holding up a fist. O'Hara nearly crashed into me. We shared a look rife with dread. No words needed to be spoken. Every instinct screamed at us to run. "What about Sparks?" O'Hara's whisper barely carried. Duty and survival waged war inside me. Duty, the hollow word we hid behind when it meant putting good men in the ground. My gaze swept the darkness, imagining Sparks trapped, wounded, those inhuman footsteps growing closer. "He's gone!" I choked out, and a part of me shattered with the words. "We head for the airlock, now!" O'Hara nodded, silent, and we turned. Not retreat, I told myself, just a tactical repositioning. And maybe, in that moment, I finally understood that the legends about the Sentinel were more than drunken stories. There were worse things than death out here. The mad dash toward the airlock was a chaotic scramble of pounding footsteps and labored breaths. O'Hara and I, seasoned in 100 dangerous situations, were reduced to terrified animals, instinct taking over where reason had failed. Behind us, the hiss intensified, mixed now with the occasional thump that sent vibrations through the ship's ancient hull. I risked a glance behind us. The corridor seemed to warp and stretch, walls bathed in a strange, faintly glowing substance. Within that substance, I thought I saw a distorted, hulking shape gaining on us. "Faster!" I screamed at O'Hara, my own steps faltering under the weight of a primal dread I couldn't name. The airlock was in sight, but reaching it felt like charging through a nightmare. Each junction, each darkened alcove held the promise of an ambush. I expected something to leap at us from the darkness, to feel the burn of alien weapons searing my flesh. The airlock hissed open at last, and we stumbled inside, hearts pounding violently in our ears. I fumbled for the ceiling controls, my clumsy fingers refusing to operate smoothly. O'Hara, typically so decisive, just leaned against the bulkhead, panting, eyes wide with a fear that mirrored my own. "Did we lose it?" he gasped, once the heavy inner doors clanged shut. I couldn't answer. Every nerve felt raw, every shadow on the viewports looked like a lurking threat. My mind raced, replaying the horrors we had witnessed. Sparks's panicked cries, those inhuman footprints, the rasping breath. We needed to get back to the colony. Warn them. Whatever the Sentinel housed, it was dangerous, potent beyond our comprehension. Maybe a science team with better equipment, maybe a military response. I didn't know what was needed, only that we couldn't face that alone. "Systems check," I forced out, my voice sounding raw and distant in my own ears. "Prepare for emergency launch. I need this rust bucket off that ship." O'Hara moved with surprising alacrity, lumbering to his console. As he worked, I let myself slump back against the cool metal. Exhaustion rolled over me in a wave, mixed with a lingering horror. We'd lost Sparks, abandoned him to whatever stalked the corridors of that forsaken behemoth. It wasn't how things were done. Risking your life for your crew was part of the unspoken pact amongst spacers. But survival warred with the part of me that still clung to a sense of honor. O'Hara's deep voice cut through my thoughts. "Systems are weird, Captain. Readings are off the charts. Power distribution isn't making sense. Like something's interfering with the..." He trailed off, and I felt the ship shudder. Not the usual thrum of the engines, but a grinding throb that rattled through the very core of the Rust Runner. "O'Hara, report!" I snapped, scrambling to my feet once more. "The ship! It's moving! Not us, I mean! The whole damn Sentinel is moving!" I stared at the viewports. The cylinder of the Sentinel drifted sluggishly against the field of stars, as though roused from its centuries-long slumber. But with that movement, a new horror dawned on me. One colder and more insidious. The ship wasn't a derelict. It was alive. The sight of that ancient behemoth stirring to life was a punch to the gut that stole my breath. My mind fumbled for logic, for any explanation other than the horrifying reality. "Systems malfunction," I said. Even to my own ears, the words were flimsy, a pathetic attempt to impose order on the chaos unfolding around us. "Systems are fried, Captain," O'Hara confirmed, worry lacing the bluster out of his usually thunderous voice. "The Sentinel. It's got power flowing through it, but it ain't coming from us, and it ain't making any damn sense. We need to cut ourselves loose." I forced the words out, my heart a cold lump in my chest. Every instinct told me that disconnecting from the ship would be suicide. But staying meant becoming a part of whatever alien process had just begun. I stumbled back to my own console, hands shaking as I tried to override the docking clamps. Alarms blared, warnings flashing across the screen. The rust runner was too deeply entwined now, the ship's systems bound by whatever power surged through the alien vessel. "Can't cut it, Captain! I can't!" O'Hara yelled, a tremor in his words. He was the brute force of our trio, the one who kicked down doors and wrenched stubborn machinery into compliance. His helplessness was chilling. The Sentinel shifted again, its movement slow but inexorable. We weren't just docked anymore. We were part of its body, being carried along as it roused itself from whatever unfathomable sleep it had endured for centuries. A terrible realization hit then. It wasn't waking up. It had never been asleep. It had been waiting. "What did we bring back with us?" I whispered, barely audible over the thrumming heartbeats of the now alien ship. "On our suits when we touched those things." O'Hara stared at me, comprehension dawning in his eyes. We'd focused on the physical, on that terrifying shadow in the corridors, on Sparks's agonized cries. But maybe the true monster was far more insidious. "It's in us," he said, his big frame trembling now. "We're hooked, just like this bucket of bolts." We weren't on a salvage run anymore. We were passengers on a cosmic horror story, caught in the machinery of something beyond our understanding. The Sentinel's movement shifted, taking on a strange, deliberate quality. We were drifting away from the asteroid cluster. "Where the hell is it taking us?" Silence was our only answer. The rust runner and the two men trapped within were now just cargo in that titanic hull. The old legends whispered of the Sentinel vanishing without a trace, spirited away to some unknown destination. Maybe we'd find out where, firsthand. I felt a grim sort of humor well up then. It took a relic older than the colony itself, a ship from an age of gods and ancient powers, to break me, a seasoned spacer with a lifetime of near-death under his belt. "Well," I managed a wry grin at O'Hara, "at least we won't die wondering what was on this damned ship." O'Hara's response was a choked laugh, devoid of its usual bravado. We'd survived the belt, the dangers of derelict salvage, countless close calls, only to be brought down by an opponent we couldn't see, couldn't fight, couldn't even comprehend. The dark irony of it all was almost enough to make a man scream. Time lost all meaning trapped inside the rust runner. The rhythms of shipboard life, eat, sleep, check the failing systems, became a pathetic mockery of control. Hours melted into days, and still the Sentinel moved with terrible purpose, leaving the familiar stars and systems behind. O'Hara and I fell into a strange, uneasy coexistence. The gruff camaraderie was gone, replaced by a shared dread that settled upon us like a shroud. We spoke little, ate less, the stale ship rations twisting in our stomachs. I watched as that big man slowly shrank inwards, the bluster stripped away to reveal a fearful core not so different from my own. The ship itself was transforming. It wasn't just the systems fluctuating wildly, or the constant tremor that throbbed through the corridors. The walls glowed with faint light, the once clean metal seeming to warp and flow in the periphery of vision. Nightmares plagued what little sleep I could snatch, haunted by visions of those glowing marks and the eerie sound that pursued us on that first ill-fated day. "We should try again," O'Hara mumbled one cycle, his voice hoarse and cracking. He'd taken to staring into the depths of the airlock, as if he could will an escape hatch into existence. "Try what?" I wasn't cruel enough to remind him how badly our last attempt to cut ourselves free had gone. "Going back," he forced the words out. "Find whatever infected this damn ship. Make it let go." It was madness, of course, yet my old recklessness stirred in the face of his hopeless plan. Maybe it was better than sitting and waiting for the inevitable, letting whatever was inside us change us into something. Sleep evaded me that cycle. Instead, I replayed the horrors we'd witnessed aboard the Sentinel, Sparks's vanishing act, the alien markings, the terrifying shape in the darkness. It formed a mosaic of madness, each element feeding into a terrifying possibility. I got up and went to the equipment locker. We'd only salvaged a fraction of the Sentinel's interior, but it was enough. When I approached O'Hara, my old mag rifle clutched in trembling hands, he just nodded. Acceptance replacing despair. I'd hoped for a fight, for him to offer some scrap of cautious logic, but it seemed that logic had long since abandoned us. The airlock was our only way back in. It hissed open, and for a moment, I hesitated. Then the memory of Sparks's shrieks came back to me, and I steeled myself. Stepping back onto the Sentinel was like plunging into a living nightmare. The glow was brighter, the air smelled as if the ship was rotting from the inside out. The corridor stretched before us, but it wasn't the same corridor we'd fled. It throbbed, branching pathways twisting and writhing as if we were stepping into the veins of a colossal alien organism. "Where to?" O'Hara grunted. The bravado was a flimsy guise now, barely masking his terror. "I don't know." I forced one foot ahead of the other, my rifle trembling in sweaty hands. "But something's calling us." And it was true, a thrumming in my head, a nauseating pull that grew stronger with each warped, glowing step. It wasn't a sound or a voice, but a sensation deeper than either, drawing us inexorably into the beating heart of the damned ship. Each step into the belly of the beast felt like a surrender. The corridors twisted tighter. The stench of rot and strange chemicals stung our eyes and made it hard to breathe. I saw it first, not a shape or a sound, but an absence, a void in the very substance of the ship, a cancerous darkness that throbbed just beyond the glowing walls. "Captain!" O'Hara's whisper held a child's terror. I moved closer, morbid curiosity outweighing the screaming instincts that warned me this was the point of no return. The darkness deepened and spread, seeming to absorb the light out of the air. I felt a strange pull from deep within tug at me, urging me toward that obscene hollow. Then it rippled. From the blackness, a shape extruded, smooth and sinuous where the rest of the ship was pitted and scarred. It was less a form and more a suggestion of one, ever shifting and impossible to fully perceive. Whatever my mind expected to see, this wasn't it. "Oh God," O'Hara whimpered, his rifle shaking in his hands. "What is that?" No answer came from the darkness, only that persistent pull, an insidious summons. And beneath it I felt a bizarre stirring, a resonance within myself, a reflection of that shape in the inky void. We stood frozen on the brink, every fibre of our being telling us to flee, yet drawn inexorably closer. Our very minds seemed to splinter, part of us resisting while another part welcomed the growing void. "Sparks," I choked out, and I tasted madness in the way I spoke his name. "He's not there, Captain." O'Hara's voice was strained. "He's a part of it now." The realization hit like a physical blow, what we'd taken for possession, for an alien infection. It was something far more twisted. The Sentinel didn't just consume, it assimilated. Every soul devoured became a new thread in its evil design. A new tremor shook the corridor, and I knew the decision was no longer ours. The inky mass inched closer, seeping over the glowing floor like a spilled stain. Suddenly, O'Hara screamed, a raw, animalistic cry. He lunged forward, rifle firing blindly at the encroaching darkness. I joined him, fear driving my every shot. The mag rounds might as well have been pebbles against the growing shadow. It flowed over O'Hara, smothering him in impossible darkness. His screams cut off abruptly, then were replaced by a hiss, like air forced through a punctured lung. His form writhed, shifting and dissolving into the black mass. Then, he was gone, leaving only a lingering sense of his terror in my own throat. As I backed away, my legs refused to obey my flight instinct. I felt it, a wrongness in my core, like something was twisting itself free inside of me. Through tear-blurred vision, the inky void solidified. O'Hara was reborn within it, his features warped and melted into a travesty. His eyes, glowing orbs now, fixed on me with a hateful intensity that chilled my soul. The ship was changing us, merging us, making us into soldiers of its terrible purpose. I retreated, each step a battle against that insidious pull. I had to get back to the Rustrunner, had to warn the colony. But the colony seemed so small now, so insignificant against the cosmic horror unfolding before me. I stumbled, fell to my knees, the void surged forward, and in that instant, with my life forfeit and an alien abyss claiming me, a final shred of defiance flared. I raised my rifle, the barrel pressed against my own temple, and I pulled the trigger. Darkness. That's what should have come. Oblivion. A blessed end to the madness. Instead, there was another jolt, a disorienting lurch back into being. My first breath was a gasp, then the stink of old air, the groaning rumble of an ancient engine straining against the impossible. I was on the Rustrunner. Impossible. And yet I knew in my bones it was true. "Think this is it, Captain?" O'Hara bellowed beside me. His voice, the rumble of it, the way he spat out, "Captain!" It was all so familiar. My head throbbed, and I fumbled for the release on my helmet, desperately needing the cool rush of recycled air. When the helmet came free, my hands were shaking. It shouldn't be like this. "We'll see," I heard myself say, and the wrongness of it struck me. My voice, my words. But my will? Confusion turned to ice-cold horror. Another tremor coursed through the ship, and then O'Hara stopped, peering down the corridor leading to the Sentinel. "Something up there," he grunted, his voice eerily familiar. It was me, and I was watching myself. I was trapped, a prisoner in my own damn body as it replayed the same doomed sequence. My body moved. My lips spoke words burned into a horrific memory I couldn't change. Then came Sparks's scream, O'Hara charging, and my body, no, not mine anymore, following. Each beat of this play unfolded, a constant torment as I rode this flesh puppet, unable to stop it. I died in that corridor, only to wake again on the Rustrunner, the cycle restarting, my sanity dangling by a thread. It was worse than death. I was doomed to relive my failure infinitely, an insignificant mote trapped in an alien machinery beyond my comprehension. O'Hara too, and maybe Sparks, all ensnared in this loop, this cruel form of existence. As the sickening pattern began to repeat again, I wanted to scream, but the voice wasn't mine to control. I wanted to cry, but the tears weren't mine to shed. I wanted to die, but I already was, in the worst way imaginable. The ship wasn't just a derelict, it was a cosmic prison, and I was just the newest inmate, condemned to an eternity. I saw my body grab a mag rifle, preparing once more to charge into the ship's decaying hull. I wanted to fight, to defy, to take back some shred of control. But I knew now that control was an illusion. The routine would play again and again. My defiance, my hope, even my fear, all part of the script written in my flesh and bone, warped by an alien logic. And with that horrifying realization came a bitter acceptance. I was a part of the Sentinel now, and there was nothing to do but endure.